So
Please distance.
I know.
it's just a TV itself, it's just smart TV.
Yeah.
We weren't sure if somebody maybe had the same remote control.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This came on.
Just randomly, yes.
Oh, I randomly am connected.
You should bring a little.
Everybody that I know.
But it's funny, because I do some TV academy, and the first day that he comes to work for us, he's trying to pull that.
I think I've had his car. Your name is Dan?
Last night.
It's
all there now.
Graduated.
Yeah.
I wanna know.
Born in this morning. There you go.
Because the But in addition.
One distance, but it was like every kid uses.
I've heard people.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. Let's call this meeting to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay,
Jamie Melky.
Here.
Kathy Macho.
Here.
Matt Bugera.
here,
Nancy Rondell.
Here.
And Michael Byerman.
here.
We do have a quorum.
Fantastic. Citizens comment? Anything that's not on our agenda tonight?
Real brief, we just had a department meeting today, started at 2 o'clock, just got done. The guys are very appreciative to work here. We have a great crew and they're all we just had a great 4.5, 5 hour meeting. So thank you for your support of our police department. I know we're by far the top, since we're talking about budgets, I know we're the top budget item, but they all appreciate working here and they understand the community that we serve. So thanks for your support. And they also that we just talked about it, so they're all happy to be here.
Tell them we all say thanks to you.
Yeah. Oh my
They
gosh.
they could be anywhere else. They could get a job anywhere they would, and they've all chose to work here, so pretty cool. It's a tribute to the community.
Did the new guys started
Started today,
today?
Yeah.
Great.
so thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? No? Yeah.
First item, so I figured we start with the capital improvements plan first, since that's big picture, and then go into the budget presentation, open up that to public hearings, and then council can discuss both. We vote.
Okay.
All right, 24-29 capital improvements plan. Just a recap of the process. It's a 6-year plan, for all projects and purchases over $10,000. So any project of purchase that's under $10,000, just keep in mind, if we need a new desk, new computer, those aren't in this. This is for big picture items, big ticket items. Any approval of this plan or any project in this plan does not commit us to purchasing that item or doing that project. Is again, just a planning tool. It's a requirement of the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. The MPEA, which is the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, it focuses on structures generally. So like, are you gonna put a building here or a park there? But we are more comprehensive because it just helps us with planning. So we include like all our projects and stuff. Just makes it easier for us when how much money we're gonna spend and which fund. It's approved by both Planning Commission and Council. And it's a better way for the city residents, staff, and council to understand, what projects we have coming up in the future, the impact it has on our funding, and what grants or funding sources we need to pursue those. Process September, October is when we start reviewing it from the department head level. I get the department heads projects, the costs, etc. in October. I compile that I distribute that to the policy team, and then November, October, late October, late November, the policy team reviews it. November, the planning commission reviews it, makes recommendations to council, and then in December, council reviews it together with the budget. For this 24-29 CIP, we have 69 projects and purchases, which is just a couple under from less than last year. Total cost is $21 million over the course of the next 6 years. Much of that is electric fund. We're talking about the substation and some of the projects, so that's a big chunk of that. Average cost per project about $300,000. Again, the substation brings that average cost pretty high. And we're seeking grants or donations for at least 9 of those projects. As I mentioned, the electric fund is about half of the overall anticipated spending in the next 6 years. That also kind of coincides with our electric fund is about half of our overall budget. When you combine all our expenditures from all our budgets together, electric fund is about half. And again, just a reminder that this does not take into consideration small purchases and small expenses, such as planting trees, benches, tables, desks, etc. So this is a total number of projects per fund, and you'll notice that the number in here is higher at 75 than the total projects we have 69. That's because some projects are split between funds. So for example, if we're doing a water improvement project that requires digging up the road, we spend a little bit of money from the streets fund to repair the road, and then the rest of the money from the water fund to repair the water infrastructure. Again, as you can see, most of the projects are from the electric fund. But we also have the streets fund with quite a few, water, sewer, in general, as well as equipment. Waterfront and DDA, as per usual, come with the fewest amount of projects. There are smaller funds. When it comes to the spending, the bulk of the projected spending, $12 million, is from our electric fund. General fund has about $2 million. So does the equipment fund, and the rest are, $1 million or less about. Again, I'll emphasize electric fund, half of that is related to this, almost half of that's related to the substation and the redo of the 46 kV lines in association with the substation. This just gives you a visual breakdown of pie chart of where the money's coming from. And as you can see, that yellow is electric fund. It's a big chunk of our anticipated spending in the next 6 years. Now, there's flexibility, especially as we get into the later years, like 2026, 27, 28, 29, of just moving these projects. They're not, like I said, this is not a commitment to doing those projects that year. Things are very fluid, but the closer we get to this year, so for 2024, 2025, we're more certain that we probably need to do some of those projects. But when you look at 28, 29, those could maybe be pushed back a few years or might be pushed up depending on our needs and wants. So again, this is it's pretty fluid, but it gives us an idea of where we're going to be spending our money. And this kind of also goes hand in hand with our planning is that, we know for certain which projects are coming in the next few years as opposed to those projects that are coming later, so we have more high expenditures in 24, 25, and 26. 2025, you see that over $7.5 million, about $8 million. That's when we anticipate the substation going in. I won't go all of these in detail, but one of the main goals of the planning commission for them reviewing the capital improvements plan is to ensure that the projects we're doing aligns with the goals of the master plan. Some of these projects align quite neatly with one goal, others, can maybe fit a few different goals. These first two goals are about attractiveness of the city and having clean air, substantial, safe bluffs, etc. So that's why you see Judd Hill Wall, because we want to have a stable bluff. The North FEMA project, which has been on our radar since we've done this FEMA project here, but the IBS, the school district, and the city all have land where there is a potential another flood mitigation opportunity. So that would require all three of us working together in conjunction to try to resolve that. At different times, we have different desires or abilities to do something, so it's been kind of hard to get all three of the entities on the same page in a given year, depending on our different expenses. But it's still on our radar. That is something we need to keep in mind. Undergrounding electric lines has been something we do every year. So then we have recreation goals in our master plan, and as you see, we have lots of our parks projects, our wheelway, our boardwalk. Those go all under our recreation goals in the master plan. You'll also probably notice that some of our goals aren't listed here. That's because I couldn't really find a project that necessarily fit that goal. So that might be something in the future to think about. All right, we have some goals in our master plan, but we don't have any projects that fit it. Is there a reason for that? Maybe there's just no projects that fit those goals, but maybe there's something that we're missing, and we have those goals for a reason. So to achieve those goals, we should be working toward them. But so yeah, another one here, a Ford Park redesign. That's kind of in line with the goal of creating a vibrant waterfront area that's accessible to people. So and Ford Park is one of our parks that's a lot of people is an accessible park to many. Harbor development, you see the harbor master building. We have a safe, efficient, aesthetically attractive streets in goal 11. And that's where you see most of our street sidewalk projects and purchases there. Non-motorized trails, again, like I said, some of these repeat, Little Travis Wheelway and boardwalk replacement are, a meaningful network of non-motorized trails. And then when we talk about goal 13 about public services, keeping them efficient and productive, these are some of those things that we feel help keep our city government productive and efficient, Finally, we have goals 14 and 15, and this is about power, water, fuel, communication linkages. And you see most of our electric projects and some of our water projects on this one as well. So this is our goal to provide people clean water, electricity, etc. So just briefly some notes. The playground installation at City Beach, we received that donation this year, this fall for the playground. So it's gonna go in next spring. The expenditure, so the revenue came in this year, much of that expenditure is probably gonna come out in the budget next year. We did not include that in the budget, so we're gonna have to amend, when we bring you the final draft, it's gonna have to include that money that's gonna be expenditure. We're still waiting to hear back from how much we need to put on the deposit. We secured it, we just haven't got the invoice for the deposit yet, so that may come soon. So then we'll know how much money we have to distribute into 2023's expenditures and how much we can contribute to 2024's expenditures. When it comes to the State Street waffling, there's two ways really it can be addressed. One is to repave it with asphalt within the next couple of years. We could wait a decade or longer, or to fix the road when we replace the aging water infrastructure. We could theoretically, if council wants us to the reason why if we just repave the asphalt now, we have to do the other project anyway, we have to tear up the road again. So it might make sense that we don't wait 10, 15 years to do the water project. We wait 5, 6 years, and then, But I'd have to, we have to get together with Lucas to figure out, move around some other projects for that. I did ask Lucas, and he's online here, but about grinding the road, and that road is so thin, it's only like 3-4 inches there, that grinding it down will eventually just cause that to crumble really quickly. So grinding is not an option. So we can talk about potentially concreting. I don't know if that would be an option as well, but the idea is we probably should do one of the two, is either repave it with asphalt soon or wait till we do the water infrastructure project to get that done. Housing projects, this was mentioned at the planning commission. We have nothing concrete for this year's CIP, but we are working with the housing ready director, Andrea Jacobs, on potential projects. And we've identified, potential areas in town and parcels that, could be good projects, collaboration between private and public sector. But we just don't have anything concrete to put on the CIP yet, but we're working toward that. Other potential future projects, and these are just going off of the age of the infrastructure, is the roofs here at City Hall and Police Station. These are 20-year-old buildings, so 20-year-old roofs. Age generally for roofs, shingles are 25 to 30 years. So we could next 5 to 10 years expect probably to have to do something there. Carpet is getting old. It's not ready to go yet. It's 20 years old. Usually 15 years is standard commercial. It's not, doesn't look bad, but eventually it will probably need to be replaced. Something else that's not on here that I could think of is renovations at the Blackbird Museum. We had before there used to be a historical quote unquote society that was just for the Blackbird Museum, and they had a lot of plans throughout the 2000s. They kind of dissolved in the 2010s at some point. And that was one of their goals, is to kind of, bring plans to redo, renovate the exhibits inside that building. As something that's been on our radar. It hasn't made to our CIP because we had so many other projects that were to precedent, but it should be on our radar in the future that, that building is kind of aging, and we probably need to, revamp it a little bit. So I don't know if it's a 5-year project, 3-year project out, I don't know when, but it'll probably go on the CIPs. I think that's all I have as far as capital improvement, the big overview of it. So I can either take questions now, or can go on to the budget presentation, however you guys want to do it. I mean, do it all at once.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That'll make it easier. All right, our 2024 proposed budget. This is also our 2024 proposed budget and 2023 amended budget, but we really focus, more for the presentation purpose on what we're going to spend in the future. But if you have questions about the 2023 amended as well, definitely answer those questions. Get this out of the way. Kind of recap of what our goals are for budgeting. Let's just kind of put everything in context. One is to cover the costs of government services and operations, and those are things like, mowing the lawn, providing, answering the phone calls here, sending out your bills, et cetera, et cetera. Those are just basic services operations, collecting brush, leaf, all that stuff. That's your government services and operations. Then we have maintaining our fund balance to cover services and operations due to unexpected loss and revenue or in emergency situations. That is where, our city clerk last year, we came together and decided to recommend how he feels best with a 9-month kind of reserve in our fund for our general fund. And that's because, if we don't receive taxes in because we get our tax bills twice in the year, and if we don't get them in one payment, then we have to keep government going, and so if we have a 9-month slush fund, we could theoretically keep our government going for 9 months before we have to start cutting back on stuff. So that's that idea of maintaining a minimum 9-month fund balance so we can keep services and operations going, which is separate then from having funds for capital infrastructure projects. So those are the necessary projects, repairing parking lots, replacing roofs, boardwalk, et cetera, versus more desirous projects like upgrading some of our parks, like Kiwanis Park, and skate park, et cetera. So that's what we have also established in our policy, a maintenance, repairs and maintenance, or capital improvements project fund, with a goal of having $1 million, keeping $1 million there eventually, so that way if something happens, building goes down, insurance doesn't cover something, or we have to replace replace a roof, we can just pull out $200,000 without worrying about how it's gonna affect our general services and operations. So usually we see, in any given year, minor fluctuations in our budget, and that's to the cost of inflation. Some years we need certain supplies, some years we don't, and those are general minor changes. Revenue projections for permits, for short-term rental licenses, et cetera. Those don't often change by that much unless we have instituted a new fee or something. So we have minor fluctuations there. Usually our big changes in the budget come from our capital projects, or restructuring of staff or something like that. Those usually where we see some of our bigger expenses. For 2024, our operating expenses are expected to be generally in line with 2023's. There's some minor changes. But in 2023 for the general fund, we saw higher expenditures, and that's because we took in a lot of money from donations and revenue for the skate park and the boardwalk. So we saw a lot more money going out. And again, that's how two big capital projects can definitely affect what our budget looks like. In the general fund, as mentioned, we're expecting less revenue than in 2023, about over $600,000 less. Some of the increases are about $50,000 more for our operating millage, $50,000 more in administrative fees, and $50,000 more for public safety millage. And our noteworthy decreases are about close to $800,000 in grant and donation revenue. And that's mostly donation money that came in for the skate park and boardwalk. Administrative fees, and I know I talked to a couple of you about this. For several years, we've never had a policy to know exactly or a calculation to determine how much we charge other funds to the general fund. So for example, let me explain this in a way that probably easiest to make sense is City Hall here has bills, light, heating, whatever, air conditioning, water. We have to pay those bills. So right now the general fund gets billed, all the expenses go to the general fund. So we need to charge the other funds because we use this building and the heat and electricity, et cetera, while we're working on projects and operations and other funds like the electric fund. So we need to devise a policy to fairly, and I won't say accurately because it's really hard to know unless you detail every single 15 minutes of your work, but to distribute fairly the amount of money that we spend on certain line items and how to distribute them to the other funds. And so these administrative fees are what the general fund charges other funds. My time, for example, I don't spend 100% of my time on general fund activities. I spend a good chunk of my time on electric fund activities. I'm always going down to Lansing. I'm always in NPPA meetings, and these are for electric fund things. So it's not fair to charge the taxpayers 100%, my salary 100% to the taxpayers when I'm spending about 40% of my time working on other funds. So we never had a policy or a formula for this. And we've called around other cities and they don't have formulas for it. They usually just, if they need to make up for a deficit, they just transfer in money from other funds so they can not show a deficit. And different cities have different percentages of their expenditures coming in from administrative fees. So we have, as you'll see, about 13% of our revenues, administrative fees. Petoskey's is almost 20%. Point Cities is like 4%, 3% or something like that. So it varies differently between different communities. We want to get away from just transferring administrative fees so we don't end up in a deficit. We want to have an actual formula that's representative of what we're spending on. So that formula, then, that's why I'm talking about this, is because that led to the $50,000 more in administrative fees and revenue when we did that calculation with the percentages that we attributed to each fund. So here's our little pie chart of where our general fund revenue sources are coming from. About half of it from our operating millage, which is 5.7, and then about 9% is for our newly, let's say, public safety millage. As you see, 13% administrative fees. Electric transfer in is 7%, and that's really, to sum it up, a return on investment from when we originally started our electric system here. And then every year we're transferring in a specific numbers of 240,000, 245,000 from our electric fund into our general fund. That's that kind of return on investment. Then there's other small little fees, tax collection fees, fire protection fees, sales and use tax, and then other 9% includes just miscellaneous, could include donations, grants, could include permit fees, and et cetera. So that's a general a breakdown. Different municipalities have different breakdowns, but because of some municipalities have a lot more millages than we do, or higher millage rate than we do. Others are more successful, with grants. We're a little more successful with donations and grants, but so it kind of varies. But most have at least half their general fund from an operating millage, so we're kind of in line with that. So expenditures looks like this in the general fund. You can see the police is about a little over a quarter. Fire is about 10%, but again, fire, it's a little skewed because we get in revenue from the other municipalities that are part of that fire authority to cover that 10%.
Just a quick question, is the 10 net or gross?
It's gross, right?
The 10 doesn't include contributions from the township.
No, this is just expenditures. Yeah, that does not include this does not include the contributions. Parks at 14%. Clerk, treasurer, city manager, legal, you see there 5%, 3%, 12%. And those aren't just salaries, those are also, we have a lot of different line items within those budgets. Within those line items within those sections of the general fund that account for a lot of that spending. All right, so some quick explanations for the minor changes in expenditures, elections, and by minor, I mean they're just not really significant cost items. Like elections, 2024, we're projecting to be around $15,000, which is maybe more than our $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 we spent this year. And that's because next year's a presidential election year. There's primaries, there's stricter requirements. We might have three elections dates next year, and we might even have a separate special election for our charter amendments that we said we would try to get through next year. So you're going to project a little more, about $10,000 more than normal or than this year. Tax rebate under accounting, that's higher due to increased housing values. City Hall, we're hoping to purchase security cameras and deed digitization. That deed digitization has been on our radar for like 5 years now, and every year we say we're going to do it, but we just put other things as precedent. It's really more, I don't call it a luxury. It's just easier on us if we have boxes of deeds and easements and stuff that are not on our system. So once every couple months, we need to search for something, and it takes us, 3-4 hours if we can find it. And we have to go through the boxes. So it just make our lives easier, but it's not a necessity. So I always keep it there because I hope to get to it, but usually sometimes I just put it to the back burner because it's not urgent. Police capital outlay, we were going to spend some money for computers in 2023 at the police department, but we didn't. So we're going to do that next year. I don't know how long it's been, how old those computers are, Kyle, but they're pretty old. They haven't been updated.
13, 14 years.
13, 14-year-old computers at the police department. So yeah, we need to get on a program of cycling them out, and what we're trying to get toward. The fire department has a project for paving their fire station parking lot, and then the trees, updating the tree inventory. We've had a tree inventory once done in the 2000s, I think 2008, 2009, then again in 2014, and should theoretically be updated every 5 years, or you have a rolling update, so you're spending a couple $1,000s each year, and you're doing, updating one section, 20% of the trees this year, and then next year. That way you have it going. That way it's not one major expense all at once. So we can do it either. But the major changes are skate park. You'll have noticed that those are decreased the overall cost for the skate park, and that's mainly because the construction of the new park with the donated money is complete, and there's also gonna be less need for maintenance. There is a capital outlay for landscaping. We did not get that grant, unfortunately, from the DNR. So what I'm proposing is we're taking out the expense and the revenue for the landscaping in this budget which was $75,000. That's how much the grant was for. And I'm gonna have staff come back to me with a plan, much scaled back plan on at least just getting some minimal basic landscaping in there. And see how much that's gonna cost. So I would probably bring that back to you sometime in the spring or late winter. Parks and grounds, it's decreased because that's where we have the western half of the boardwalk itemized there is in that. We don't know yet when the eastern half will be constructed, so we're not putting that, even though the CIP has it for 2024, I don't know. It could be the fall, it could be next year, I just don't know. So I just didn't want to put something in there for 2024 that might not happen. Unfunded liability, we've going to set some money aside, or we want to set some money aside for unfunded pension liability. Nick kind of touched on this at the last meeting, but this unfunded liability is the difference between what we estimate the cost of future benefits and the fund set aside to pay for those benefits. So state requires us to set 60%, was it, as a minimum? You know, Quick Whitaker here wants to see, 70-75%. It's just, we don't want to end up in a situation where we don't have money to pay our retirees' pension. That's just, the state would step in. So we're starting to have a separate line item under other functions that we can hope to slowly put some money in there so we can reach that 70-75%. Same concept for similar concept about setting aside money for the CIP reserve fund. In February of this year, as I mentioned earlier, we passed that. And anytime we have a budget surplus and we've met that 9-month minimum, we hope to put money in our repairs capital improvements fund so we can have money to pay for repairs, maintenance, and new projects that come from the different fund. So there's some trends, so you can see the surplus deficit, 2015 and 2024. You saw 2018-19, we had some quite big deficits, and part of that was planned with the FEMA project there. It kind of came on to us, but 2021 here, you see, this is what part of not having the flexibility with millage, and now when we have the millage 23 and 2024, we're seeing we're in the plus. So I think we're pretty stable going forward, so long as there's no big demand for changes in services and operations. Just some final notes on the general fund. Again, the revenues are projected to cover operations and capital projects with about $160,000 left over. The draft budget showed $240,000, but that didn't account for the playground purchase. And then that $160,000 is distributed to our unfunded liability, our capital improvements reserve fund, and then meeting our 9-month operating reserve requirement. And I think that's one goal is we always want to have that 9-month minimum operating reserve requirement first, and then distribute any money left over to our capital improvements reserve fund, as well as our unfunded liability. The other funds, kind of probably saw them in the CIP, but those, it's pretty typical that most of our changes in our other funds are due to capital improvements projects. Whether it's an electric project or a street project or whatnot, those are the changes. You don't see any major changes in those funds from operating and services aspect. Just to get a view of our funds, comparing them to each other, I chose the revenues for 2024 as opposed to surplus deficit, because a surplus deficit is not a good visualization because it doesn't give you a good idea of how much money we actually spend or take in for those funds. So this shows better how much, what chunk each of these funds of our overall budget or revenue take in. And as you can see, electric is the big one there with over $5 million in revenue. Then our general fund and water sewer fund are also the next biggest. Other funds are relatively small apples in comparison. But looking at surplus deficit, it's good, but at our tax revenues, and those are our 3 millages that we have, the streets millage, the public safety millage, and our general fund operating millage. We have a total combined millage rate of about 7.64, and you can see our operating fund is about 3/4 of that, which goes to our general fund, as well as our public safety, which goes to the general fund for police and fire, then our local streets, which goes to the local streets fund. And this is, this took some work to kind of put together as how do we spend our tax revenue in 2024. I had to kind of take out all the other revenue that we had in our revenue in our general fund and kind of, you know, let's say we have a donation money, you take that away from the parks budget. If you have a donation for the skate park, you take all that money away, and then you have, you know, your parks, but your parks line item is left with, you know, a certain amount of money left. So then you distribute the tax revenue proportionally that way. Public safety is our biggest spender for tax revenue, and of course we have the public safety millage, but public safety combined, as police and fire combined, is about 31%. Local streets, that stays at 12%. That is our local streets fund. Parks and Rec is about 12%. You have your grounds, but brush leaf, pickup, recycling, that's 8%. DPW administration, 6%. City Hall, which we're counting as, you know, legal, clerk, treasurer, city manager, planning, zoning. That's that expense, and then other is just other line items, miscellaneous ones here. There are other functions, etc. This chart just gives you a look at the cash balance in city funds. So that 9-month minimum that we talk about, we've only established that for the general fund. We've talked about, you know, potentially how we could establish something similar for other funds. But this just kind of shows you what our 2024 projected cash balance is. And I took a 2-year average projected expenditures. So I took, you know, 23, 24, just so I can have an average of 2 years. And because 1 year could skew, you know, it's probably better to have more years of, but I did 2 years. Then I showed cash balance as percentage of that expenditure. So 75% is that 9 months, right? There's 12 months in a year. 9 divided by 12 is 7. Yes, I got my math right. I didn't have to ask Nick. Joke. Okay. But anyway, so you see there's 1, 2, 3. There's about 5 of our funds that have met that 9-month minimum. So that's where we would feel, say, yeah, we could continue our operations and our services if something went wrong with our, you know, our revenue sources, and we could be good with those. There's some that we are kind of lower on, you know, our electric, water, sewer, and electric and water sewer, 2 of our most important services to the community. Of course, a lot of our services are important in public safety, but people need their electricity and their water and sewer. So something to keep in mind is that, you know, whether or not, how do we look at keeping a healthy reserve balance for some of these other funds that are maybe more important. You know, equipment fund would probably be the hardest because we tend to save up money in the equipment fund to buy a piece of equipment. So you'll see sometimes, well, why do you got, you know, 200% in your equipment fund as well? Because we want to make a future purchase. And when we make that future purchase, then that'll bring that cash balance back down. So, so really, I don't know if a minimum, there's no services really in equipment funds, so they have a few, but I don't know if a 9-month minimum balance makes as much sense for equipment fund as it does for electric fund, for example. So that was a general recap of the budget. And I just want to clarify and, you know, just to help council, help us out what council's role is and what city manager or city clerk's role is council really is asking a question: what services and amenities do you want to see stay the same? Do you want to increase, or do you want to reduce, or even eliminate? That's a policy decision. Another one is, what projects do you think we need to do? Or what projects, even if we need to do them or just want to do them, which ones do we want or need to do now versus need to do later? And then what kind of surplus deficit? You know, how do you want to distribute that money? What do you want to see? And then basically we go try to make that happen in the numbers for you. So we will go figure out a way to increase, reduce, eliminate that service or operation or amenity. We'll advise you on finding the funds for the projects or the consequences of delaying projects. And then we will would add or reduce to our goals and advise our council how a surplus or deficit will impact our future financial or financial stability. So, and that is it in a nutshell. Of course, there's way more to the budget. Obviously, you know, the budget is 40 pages. There's a lot there. We try to just hit on some of the bigger ticket items, but you know, every year people have different questions about different things. So I can give you some good high-level answers. Nick knows the details, so I'm sure many of you have already met with him anyway, but, yeah, there's a lot there. I just, this is why we give you the budget and CIP back in early December, so you have at least a few weeks to look at it and have some time to digest it and then answer questions. So at this point, Mayor, I think we probably should open it to a public hearing, and then you guys can take public comment and then discuss and direct as you see fit.
Jim, we have some verbiage for public hearing.
I think you would just make a motion to open a public hearing.
I don't think we don't have to. Oh, that's right, it's not closed session.
I'll make a motion that we open the public hearing about the budget.
I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay.
And for those on Zoom, just remember, I think it's Lucas and maybe two other people, but you just can raise your hand if your Zoom hand, if you want to make a comment.
Anyone in the audience? Mr. Moore.
I'm thinking back to our headline discussions and our general fund revenue. Nick, you projected what our general fund millage rate will decrease? We're expecting a decrease this year.
No, I'm not. I don't know that for a fact yet, but judging by the inflation rates and whatnot, they can up to 5%, which I think last year was the first time ever that I can recall. So that probably will reduce that millage reduction fraction down to 0. But then as the economy slows and maybe the house market starts to level off, then we're back on the same trajectory that we always have been.
Okay, so those revenue figures assume no change in the.
No change in the millage with an increase in property taxes, which as those things may develop, such as property tax values start to level off or drop, then that millage starts to drop back down again. And then we're converging at the path in the woods that we were looking at. And it's just the same story going forward. These millages are going to continue to drop until they're gone.
Millage rates.
Yes, rates.
A good example of that is our police millage rate is expected to still be at 1. We had it at 1 this year, while our streets millage rate is at 0.94. So while both were passed as 1 mill rate, we're collecting less in our streets fund by about $10,000-$15,000 because Headley has reduced that rate, that millage rate. So anyway, that's just one
Unfortunately, at
example.
this point, the tax values have increased to the point where we're making ground, but that's a slippery slope as we start to go backwards on values of housing and tabs and such. So the problem, I'm not saying it's still going to rear its ugly head. Could be a while before we have to address it again because of the public safety millage really bolsters us up, but those millage rates will still continue to do their thing.
Anyone else for public comment?
I have a question, Dan, I'm over Summit Street, Victor or Nick, it looks like there's kind of 2 categories for trees. There's tree trimming and then there's tree and bluff management, is that right?
Tree trimming is an electric fund, right?
We have tree and in the general fund, we have tree and bluff side management. Which includes, tree board and planting trees.
Program tables.
Right, but then we have a tree trimming section within the electric fund that deals more with trees
Right away.
in the right way of electric lines. And that is something that you brought that up now. In the electric fund, under tree trimming in our budget, there's a number that needs to be adjusted. So I mean, as you guys have questions, that's one of them that I will address, that I need to make a change. It was budgeted last year for the $40,000 to take out the trees along Bay Bluffs under that 46 kV line. And I just stuck the 40,000 back into 2024, and it should be more along the lines of 10 to 15,000 where it normally is. Yeah, that one needs to be reduced.
That's right. I got that on the screen now. So,
And so then viewing services are under tree and bluff management.
yes, correct.
Yeah, that one should be much less than 40 grand.
Right. What else? On the computer? No further public comment, I'll make a motion to leave public comment.
That's support.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Yeah, well, sorry, sir. Nice job on the budget, again. Nick?
Yeah, I've answered lots of questions for you guys outside of the here, but if you got things that cropped into your mind, now's the time.
Bill, we have a couple of contracts that are coming up for approval. Are the wages and salaries that are projected, are we kind of anticipating?
Yes, those have been anticipated for the budget for
Yeah,
2024.
what we've known of an actual signed contract.
Right,
but we're off
exactly.
the-
Obviously, the contract haven't been approved yet, but those are taken into consideration. And Nick, you mentioned the reduction of the tree trimming, the electrical fund.
Yeah.
From 40 to.
I would say, I would like to talk with our
Okay.
supervisor of electric, but I would looking anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000.
I can maybe expand on that question a little bit because through the MMEA, the Michigan Municipal Electric Association, of which we are a member, we applied for a grant, I think for, up to a couple $100,000, that would allow it, that would fund basically over the next 2 years, a cost sharing, I think we do 25% and they pay 75% of normal services that we do in the electric fund anyway. So if we get that grant and, because there's always stuff to be trimmed, poles to be, that will increase that up because we'll have that grant match. So that you'll see, because if we're taking in, $20,000 for tree trimming from the grant, then you'll see in revenue, then you'll see that number, be like $25,000 and there. So I just want to put that caveat that if we get that approval from the state on that grant, then.
And then that would then just be however it washes out with the grant and the
Yeah.
expenditures will amend it at the end of the year.
That's why we have amended budgets. So.
Exactly right.
And regarding the CIP, that the exercise is done every year, so correct? So next year, next October, September, October, we'll be looking at 2025 through 2030, correct? And that's where, we might contemplate making some adjustments for those projects that are far out, or sooner, or.
You can even make any adjustments to the CIP right now.
Okay.
And I can, come back when we approve it next Monday. I would just come back with an amended. I wouldn't do all the charts and stuff, but I'll come back with a timeline of when we do those projects or take projects off. But ideally, this goes through the planning commission
Yeah.
first, right? So then they look at that and they have recommendations, but council has ultimate authority. So I would say if there's any changes you really want to see that are, in the future, well, especially for next year, 2024, of course, those are incorporating the budget. So if there's any changes, there, you would want to make those as soon as possible. The ones that are further out, you could just make note of, I see you have that project in 2026, but maybe it doesn't need to be done until 2029 or 2030. Or there's a project that's not on the list, we'd like to see it for 2025 or 2026. So those aren't as urgent as the ones that I would say that are for next year.
I have a couple things, but I'm okay, me too. somebody does. We talked last week about the contributions from the townships to the Park and Rec. And I had fun this week pushing a whole bunch of numbers around to just see population and ages in those townships and that kind of stuff with some numbers. And an interesting one is over 4 years, City of Harbor Springs has paid 71.5%. Little Traverse has paid 12.5% and West Traverse has paid 16%. When you add all 4 years together, divide them because each year is different. But our populations, we are here in the city 19%. West Traverse it's 33 and Little Traverse is 47. I'm rounding some numbers, but it's exactly the opposite of the payment. So I've had some discussions with Victor because the percentages of what they pay for what parks is all over the map and nobody really knows where it came from. So I guess my hope would be that in the next year or so, staff will dig into it a bit. We've got a number of different things that were decided a long time ago, 40, 50 years ago, that we've never really taken a look at again. And this is one of them. And I think we need to do that. Because a lot of stuff has changed in the last 40 years. You know, so I think we need to have some kind of reflection of that and what we're looking at. I also talked about the postage and the mailing for the electric company, the $10,000 worth of postage. And a fun story, I had a little lady at Perry Farm come up to me yesterday and tell me how she'd put her bills on to get them on email. She's probably 90 years old. And she said, well, of course I don't need these. I just need to know what I have to pay. And so it was a fun interaction of she was paying attention, which was wonderful. And she was
And I
able,
was too, because
did you? And I did too.
That
because
evening I went.
I
I think the person at Perry Village probably was able to do it quicker than I could.
Yeah. But it was just fun to see. That was one thing we just had never looked at, and it can be improved pretty easily.
Yeah, and we actually talked about that the next day at City Hall. We're gonna find some ways to push it out.
Some ways to let people know. what's
Website, social
possible.
media, Harbor Light.
Yeah, I think we could probably get a.
Yeah, there's something stated, I think, on the bills themselves.
Yeah,
But at this point,
but we don't. But we don't.
Yeah, you don't look at
We don't look
your
at
bill. You look at.
Some put it on auto pay and it gets paid and I file the bill away and that's kind of silly. And if I really need a hard copy, I'll print it. So it was just kind of fun to see some results from something right away. It was fun.
Yes.
But that and really the percentage of some of the other things too that we've just always done. I think we need to be aware of that and take a look at them, see if they still make sense. Thanks for all the work on the budget. I know it's a huge amount of work. Even the hours you've spent with us on making it in the last week and a half. So I appreciate it very much. CIP, I still have a little bit of concern over that street sweeper, just because it's a lot of money and I don't know how necessary. I mean, have we had complaints that the streets are dirty or are they causing problems with the sewers? I just think it's something we should probably take a good look at because it seems like a lot of money for something we don't use very much.
Yeah, it might be cheaper to rent one
Yeah.
for the amount of volume.
Yeah, it's just, that's one thing and that's in the 2024, so that's coming up.
yeah, so I think Lucas kind of spoke to it last time.
Yeah.
I think if you want, Lucas, if you want to just speak a little more to street sweeper about. But I know you said at one point we did actually contract out with a company for the street sweeping and then I don't know if they ended up being more expensive. But I'm not sure. Lucas?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we used 2 years ago contract with a company. I think they were out of Kalkaska originally, and then they moved to Grand Rapids and to larger markets, and it did get very expensive. They would come up once in the spring and kind of do an initial sweep, if you will, from the wintertime maintenance that we do because it gets dirty. And that's why we had an old at that time an old sweeper from the 60s or 70s that we had, and then we did replace that in 2002 with a similar model to what we had, which is designed to do warehouses, parking lots, things like that, not necessarily roads. So right now we do have a 2002 And that was designed for, like I said, warehouses, and I believe that was between $60,000 and $80,000 at that point in time. They are expensive, but they do last a very, very long time. The unit that we would be looking at has been around for a long time. And, you know, it's a very versatile machine as far as sweeping goes. It has a lot more options. Like now, I don't know if you've seen it go down the road in the spring and it's a cloud of dust. Sometimes on Lake Street, you can't see traffic going in either way. So it's something that would be around for a long time, 20 plus years, to spread that cost out, and it would be much more efficient and effective.
Lucas,
Lucas, what are the, you know, any way to project like the maintenance costs of the new unit on an annual basis? And what type of, does it run off of diesel, propane? How's it powered?
It is a diesel powered one, or they are. I believe it may be an option to get it in propane. I actually have a representative from the company coming up on the 20th, to kind of go over the different options of different machines to kind of see where and what would work best for us. As far as annual expenses, right now we replace the brooms and the underbody brooms, if you will, and filters and side brushes on our warehouse sweeper, and I would say we spend between $2,000 and $4,000 a year right now on replacing the brooms and filters, plus the time spent or involved in doing that.
What would we do with the old one?
We would look to sell that.
any questions, thoughts on the sweets?
I guess-
Sweeper?
I guess I'm not really clear on how much that gets used. The street sweeper.
Yeah, Lucas,
I have to say, I don't remember seeing the street.
Yeah,
sweeper.
and there's a reason for that. A majority of the time that we do the street sweeping, we do it between 5 and 7 a.m. before the traffic's out, just for safety consideration. So it is something that really isn't seen, but is utilized quite a bit, very heavily in the spring, and then also throughout the summer as well. When we get the rainstorms and different things like that, we usually go out. But again, it's usually between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. So it's not something that's noticed very much.
Okay, thanks.
questions for Lucas on street sweeper right now, or?
No.
All right, thanks, Lucas. Stand by.
About. I've got a few other, I've asked Nick a lot of questions. I probably asked a couple of these already and I'm not clear. I wanted to go over something you said when you were describing what the administrative fees are in the general fund.
Yep.
Do I assume that this includes, for example, the electrical fund, the person who does the electrical billing is in this office? So is that her share
So-
in this, or is it somewhere else?
Yes, no, yes, she is located in this office, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a billing section, I believe, in the electric fund. where
Okay.
she- That.
Okay,
Yep.
okay,
Yeah, when she fills out her time card, she'll put in how many hours she spent on billing for electric and water and sewer. Then
okay.
the rest of it stays in the general fund for payroll and whatever else she's doing.
So I'll just expand a little bit. I do have a worksheet that, you know, Nick and I put together and I shared with Nick about the administrative fees, how we did it. And I don't distribute the administrative fees to every single line item in the.
Oh,
and
right.
Because it doesn't make sense to distribute to charge electric fund for administrative fees for parks and grounds, because they don't hardly do anything with parks and grounds, so. So there's different ways of doing it, but I've, based on my hours worked and percentage of overall expenditure, we came to these percentages. And it's complicated, but it's better than what we had, which was nothing. So.
Okay, well, and I assume then you can change it if you.
Yeah, no, and
Better approach too.
At this point, it seems like a decent approach, aside the most accurate approach is, like I said earlier, is keeping track of how we spend every 15-30 minutes, but that's just a administrative burden. It's just, you don't.
Also takes a lot of.
It takes a lot of time, yeah, but
I agree.
anyway, but yeah, so not every single line item is distributed to.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
And I'm just happy with this administrative fees now that we have some sort of methodology
Right,
to support what we're doing, because frankly, no other cities that I'm aware of, they just use it to balance their budget. At least we can back it up if we need to.
okay. And can you explain once more, under the accounting, what's the tax rebate
Yeah.
expenditure?
We have a 425 agreement with, I think there's 22 or 24 houses in Glen Drive
Mhm.
that are part of West Traverse Township.
That's right, okay.
We collect the taxes for them because it just makes sense. We provide city services to them.
Mhm.
So we levy our millage on those homes. And then the township levies 1.2 mills. So we submit the 1.2 to them because they're in West Traverse Township,
Mhm.
but we keep the rest to maintain the roads in front of their homes and such. So it's common. That's how Bay Harbor, same situation with Resort Township.
There are so many.
You can still keep coming in during the week if you want.
There's still a week left, right? That's- I probably will take advantage. And under the fire department, the capital outlay is for the parking lot?
Parking lot up at the state road fire
Okay.
department. They're big trucks when they come in and out. The blacktop's just crumbling and the drain's about ready to fall in, so it's time.
Oh, okay.
And that shows as a capital outlay for us, but that's shared with the
Right.
fire
That's
authority.
well with the fire, right, okay.
So.
So we're not paying all that $30,000.
Right. Just a percentage.
Probably half,
Oh, right,
if that.
right.
40%.
Yeah, so in fact, actually, the $30,000, it's 30,000 out of it, but we manage the budget.
That's
for the
right,
fire
right,
authority.
okay, right, I understand, that's right. Did I actually think regarding the state road waffling? I actually thought I saw a surveyor out there today. Somebody looking at that already?
There was, I don't know what they were doing.
I don't think he was looking at that, but I could ask him. I know who he was.
Oh, okay, I was just curious to know if they were actually working on that already.
I don't.
He was on Summit. I don't think that he was getting that far, but maybe
Oh,
not.
it was right, no, it was, I
Oh.
was looking right at
Okay.
the bumps.
Now, Lucas, can you just kind of expand on the State Street waffling about, we talked about I'll think about a better word to use. I can think about Bill Mulder now.
I think bumps.
Yeah, but Lucas and I talked about the grinding of it and what that could cause, how it could cause it to crumble. So Lucas, you kind of talk about the grinding and also, theoretically pushing up the water project there, to maybe get that road done sooner so we don't have to do a temporary fix and then tear it up again. And also the thought about using concrete potentially for that section of the road and then asphalt for the rest. I know that's a few different questions, Lucas, but if you can talk about those.
Yeah, we'll start off with the grinding process. Like you said, because the asphalt's only so thick, if you grind off 3 inches of one spot and you reduce the thickness by 1/2, then you're going to have soft spot and the road will deteriorate probably very rapidly. So not a really good option to just grind off the material. As far as the survey crew that was out there today, Yes, that was us. I spoke with Benchmark, to get some initial plans in the work as far as doing some design work there. One of the things that we had thought of was with the detour that M119 has right now, if we get the preliminary design concept in, we may be able to ask MDOT to help pay for part of that refinishing of that road because they have detoured a state highway onto our local roads. So I did push that up to at least get a preliminary design going and get some cost estimates and see if MDOT would be willing to reimburse us on redoing that road sooner than later.
That's great, yeah.
Because it shoved a lot more traffic to that corner with that detour there, a whole lot more. Plus, we wouldn't want to do it and then have them come up and tear up their part
Well,
and mess it up. So that was a good idea. Yeah.
Thanks, Lucas. Lucas, I've gotten this from someone else, but the idea of putting concrete there.
Oh yeah, that is part of the discussion and more than likely, yes, that concrete that is there. The reason the concrete is there is because the section that is concrete was extremely bad 25 years ago or so, and that's why it got replaced with concrete, is to prevent that. So we would definitely be looking at extending that concrete section on the slope of that road.
Great, thanks, Lucas.
great.
Anything else, Kathy?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm hesitant about the tree inventory only because I feel like to do an inventory every 5 years is a big expense, whereas if we could get to a point where we had a plan to like maintain the inventory, where if we remove trees, we go in and make note of that, and then we don't have to do an actual complete inventory every 5 years.
Tree lady.
I tend to agree, you know, what are we, 1.5 miles square? Our big project on tree board this year was to come up with a street tree plan for the state. And so we've been going out and kind of surveying, like, where does traffic need to come and where are there holes, like where trees need to be filled in. It hasn't taken us all that long to do, and I think you'd have the inventory, and then what would you do with it? Like, there's not gonna be a red light come on at City Hall when a tree dies, you know, somebody's still gonna have to go out and drive around and check the health of trees and that kind of thing. So I know Victor feels that it's important. I think for such a small town, I don't agree.
I wonder if we could talk to like the bio station or some class, you know, that needed a project, even more central, and let them do some of the parks. They may not be able to do the whole thing. They could do some of the parks or some specific areas, if that might be a way to get an inventory
Right.
without spending a ton of money doing it and give some good experience to.
Yeah, say the Boy Scouts.
Yes, something, or somebody who knew trees, you know, a
Some
class. that
Michigan
was-
Tech or, you know, places that have forestry programs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with a bio station on Douglas Lake. I mean, maybe, I don't know what their programs are right now, but something like that.
Is the tree inventory is literally a list of
All-
each tree and
well,
where it is?
Well, it's more complex than that. So it's a list of the trees, it's where they're at, the condition, so
Okay.
it's, and their size. It's, you know, it's treated as, the tree inventory is treated as trees are a resource, just like any other infrastructure. So they're a financial resource. Every time you plant a tree, it costs money. It costs money to maintain it. So you look at it as trees as an expense. You kind of want to protect your resources. So, I mean, I do see it is an expense. It would be hard at this point to probably, almost kind of do like some, I guess, a half re-inventory anyway, because we haven't been keeping track of where we have been removing trees or where we've been planting trees, so we'd have to go out there anyway to update the existing tree inventory with the new tree plantings and removals.
And I'm not saying I'm like against it, I just think we need more of a plan as to how we could maintain that instead of having to do a complete re-inventory every 5 years.
And it's also touched up on something else is maintenance of the existing trees that we have already in place. So we're kind of ambitious, or try to be ambitious with planting trees. But to maintain a tree is takes a lot of work too, and effort, and that's kind of why we see some, faster dieback on trees, is because we don't have as much effort going into maintenance of existing trees, and we're planting new trees. So there's an expense coming at it either way. I mean, if you look at trees as as in our tree plan, it's a resource for community health benefits. Increased canopy provides a lot of benefits. That's it's a goal of a tree plan to have that. But if we're planting new trees and not maintaining the trees we have, which is also an expense, teaching DPW and tactics to keep them alive, the trees, and that's more time and money from DPW to keep trees healthy, where our DPW is looking at trees in the streets as, is potentially interference with infrastructure. So you're having one look at trees as like, they're interfering with our infrastructure. Then another aspect of the city is we need to keep this tree healthy, and alive and in perfect condition, which that doesn't exist. But so there's a lot to balance there, I think. It's I guess, from my perspective, I would say if we're going to have a tree inventory, which we've had, so in 2009, if we're going to continue doing a tree inventory, it should be done soon, because it's been, a lot of decades since we've done it last. But if we're going to roll back to a tree inventory, then that's fine if that's what council wants, but then we have to find a way, and think about a way to keep track of the trees that we have, because there are resources, and they're financial resources, and we want to make sure we're maintaining them and keeping them.
And to be honest, that's the one issue that's been brought up to me about trees from other residents is the city doesn't take care of the trees they've got. They never water them. Well, I don't know how I don't know who runs that, who handles that, who means.
Different areas, that's the thing, we have different areas of town have different watering. Some of them have gator bags, and sometimes they're full, sometimes they're not. Some areas we have irrigation, and some areas where we do plant trees in the street, it's actually residents plant those trees, with our permission, and they're required to take care of them. So a lot of street trees you see are actually, the requirement of the people who planted them to take care of them. And our agreement with them is only 2 or 3 years, I believe, to maintain them. And then it's, so the more trees that we add, the more maintenance burden on our DPW staff, because they're the ones who generally are in charge with
Some DPW.
Yeah, and then it's kind of what takes precedent, all other services, infrastructure services generally come first. You got water, sewer, and all this other stuff that's streets, that's more important to many people, but then you see the neglect in some areas of trees because we don't have as much attention to them. So I don't know if I feel strongly about a tree inventory. I just feel that if we're going to have one, if we're going to keep one, it needs to be updated and maintained regularly, because then what's the point of having a tree inventory if you're not regularly updating it? So that's, but I do think we need to offer somehow more focus on the maintenance of existing trees, at least, because we do add, and I think it's just good to increase the canopy, but we're also removing trees quite often too, that pose interference with infrastructure that are dying or dead, so.
This might be more of a tree board topic, but maybe we would trial for a year, and Lucas can respond to it, and we'll talk about it at tree board, but having one of his guys once or twice a year drive around and just look at conditions of trees. I see them doing that much more easily than looking at, an Excel spreadsheet with tree number 907, whatever.
We do got a city arborist there, probably.
Too expensive.
Well, our guys do it, takes away them from doing something else. Anyway, just a thought.
Wouldn't we be better served to spend that money on maintenance of the trees than having an inventory of them?
I mean, that's one philosophy. Yeah.
I mean, because that's the issue, is more maintenance of the trees. I mean, whether we have 1,001 or 1,015 trees, I don't really care. I just want 1,015 healthy trees.
Or 1,001.
Or 1,001.
Next year, maybe we, for a year, try transferring that over to DPW for maintenance.
Right.
Well, it would be in the tree, it'd still be the tree bluff side line item, and it just wouldn't be going toward inventory, it would be going toward maintenance, and part of the maintenance is, you know, it could be installing irrigation lines, it could be doing different things. I would have to get together with Lucas to kind of talk further about that. But I mean, it's a good point, you know, could spend more money on maintenance of the trees is. We also have the tree donor program, so when people donate trees, that's more trees we have to maintain. So even though technically they donate the trees $600 per tree, you know, that's supposed to cover the maintenance of the tree, keeping it alive for a few years, but it's still our guys' time that's keeping that alive. So it covers that cost covers their time, but something to keep in mind. But yeah, I mean, it's one philosophy, spend more money to maintain the trees.
I think going back to like reaching out to a local organization that does that, like maybe they would come in and help take care of our trees for the summer. You know, maybe Boy Scouts will fill gator bags or whatever.
That's a good idea.
Worth looking into.
Up on trees. You know what to do.
I guess no inventory next year and shift that money toward maintenance.
Yeah.
Is that, I don't know if I got consensus there, so.
And I think the maintenance needs to be a part of the regular, this is what we're gonna do, at least trying it for a year. Is it needs to be a regular routine. It's not something that this department does when they don't have anything better to do. Which is kind of the gist I was getting from some of us was that it wasn't getting attention because electric and, you know, and I'm not saying those aren't more important, but.
Well, and generally it's just generally the case, yeah, that there's other needs come first. It's not that they tend to be neglected, it's just not a priority. It's not high on the priority list of.
It looks like right now on trees and bluff site management in the general fund, we've discussed the tree trimming over in the electric fund. This, we've got budgeted contracted services of 45 grand, which would include an inventory. So we could just reduce that by X. Or we could reduce that line item for contracted services and maybe increase wages a little bit to. If we can figure out a plan to do more maintenance with trees. Okay.
Yeah, I'll sit down with Lucas and figure out we can shift it, we'd have to figure out a plan though.
Yeah, and then we'll bring whatever changes they can come up with and. That's that before we stop. Who currently does the inventory?
Down next week. I think the first one was in 2008 or 2009.
Or is it one year or every 5 years?
I don't know, I don't have the bills from last,
I just didn't know if anybody.
2014 was the last time I had it.
And did we have it before that?
2014, 2009, and I'm not sure if we had it before.
Yeah, I'm
that.
not sure. I mean, I never really heard about it.
Don't we have a relatively updated list of, you know, the different types of trees that we have, you know, percentage wise and,
Roughly, we do.
you know,
We do have
so.
the inventory is there, and that's another idea of the tree inventory is, you know, all right, So you, to make sure you're not planting too many of one type of species.
Exactly, and that, I think that's important to have some of that biodiversity or whatever it's called, so that we're not all, we don't have all Dutch elms in one area and then all of a sudden get hit by a disease that no maintenance person's ever gonna. So there is some, I think, worthiness of having a tree inventory because it guides, what it helps make informed decisions on what types of trees you're gonna plant and where. But on the other hand, if it's such a costly measure that money could be better spent on maintenance, I get that too.
I think we have a general idea from the other inventories, if I remember right, like we have lots of
I'm
maples.
not sure we didn't get any new information, and redoing an inventory, I think would probably be about the same percentage.
Sure.
So we do have that definitely as
As
part
long
of
as
our
that's pretty
process and
accurate.
policy and tree board when we're looking at trees.
I guess where I was coming from too is like, historically, we've never spent more than like 22,000 on contracted services, and now we're looking at 60,000 between the two different funds. And like, that's a significant increase, and if that's because it costs so much to do the inventory, then I would like to see a plan to maintain the inventory versus having to do it every 5 years to do it and then continue to upkeep it.
I agree, I think that's a good
Makes
idea.
sense.
That'd be the idea of having a rolling.
Right. But there isn't like a plan to do that. Right now, it's like, we're gonna do the inventory and then what?
And that's a tree board probably recommendation, right?
Yeah, I think.
Board and
It's in the tree plan.
Yeah.
That, so.
And, it's like up at Kiwanis Park, I mean, do the trees in the woods really need dog tags? And I don't.
So we haven't
I
done,
mean-
we haven't, there's, a lot of the trees aren't even in our, so our inventory is very selective of, streets and
Right, but
certain
Maybe
parts.
just focus on streets and parks,
Mhm.
or the parks downtown, or.
Not the wooded areas.
We certainly don't want to have to water the trees in the wooded areas. I
Right.
mean, to me, that makes no sense. We want to keep them safe. I mean, if something's coming down at Kiwanis Park, we want to make sure it's maintaining the safety aspect of it. But I would think it's mostly along the streets and the parks where, and our newer trees that we plant and that they need to be trimmed around the base of them correctly. That's been an issue for a long time now. So those kinds of things, but in terms of our big wooded areas, they need to do what they need to do. I mean, I think.
They've been fine.
They've been fine, except for safety stuff, if like they're gonna fall in it.
Well, we're really talking about the trees that we've planted or have spent.
Mostly the newer planted
ones that we.
ones are the ones that are gonna need the
Yeah,
attention.
agree.
And then old ones that need to be cleared.
I was meeting with, city officers anyway on Thursday to go over some of the stuff, so. Talk about what that would entail, the cost for a tree inventory. Or what we're talking about here.
Anything else?
My eyes are crossed, yours must be mine are crossed.
If there's other questions, then I think what we'll do here is make those changes that we need to make. And then bring the final budget. Next week.
Yeah.
And was there any, at this point, I know Lucas is meeting with Benchmark to do that design, is there? I won't add that to the CIP for 2025, because we don't, for the waffling, for 2024 for the waffling of State Road, but I think it's something we should just, it may end up happening if MDOT's gonna contribute something next year.
So you think we need to add it to?
No, I don't
the
think, we need to, I mean, unless you guys want me to change the CIP at this point.
I think especially if we can maybe get MDOT to help
Pay
pay for it, then I think that
Coordinate with
we
them.
just need to fight for that.
So the only, then that leaves, I think, an unanswered question here is the street sweeper. Because there's some discussion around that. So do we bring that back next Monday in the budget with the street sweeper or not. So I think that's one of the biggest ticket item we need to.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I should.
Yeah. Lucas has probably looked into this, but I wonder if there's a chance to go for a used street sweeper for 150,000 or something like that to upgrade what we can do. Might not be perfect, but could that free up 100,000 for something else?
Well, Lucas said he was gonna meet with Guy this week, right? Would he be able to?
After the 18th, unfortunately.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that's what-
Oh, that's right.
Lucas, have you looked into used street sweepers, if those are available or?
Yeah, that is definitely one thing that I will discuss with the sales rep there. I have looked to see if there are used models. There definitely is. And the number that was presented, the 250, that would almost 100% will be under that number. When I put those numbers in for equipment, I want to make sure that it's covered. 90% of the time when we get new equipment, we come in significantly under budget.
I mean, I appreciate him doing that. It was just a one thing, so I guess.
I guess there's a couple of ways that we can look at this as far as this process. Leave it in there. This is a plan, not set in stone. Have Lucas do his research on maybe finding a used model as, and go from there. If we decide, no, it's $265,000, we'll hold off. Or come back during the course of the year to you guys, even though this may have been adopted. We can say, no, you know what? We're not doing this because it came in more than we thought. We'll amend the budget down and just not buy it. Or I found one for $100,000.
Yeah,
Was this a need that was desperate for this coming spring? Do you know?
I don't think it's a desperate need, no, not by any means.
Okay.
It's been on the plan for several years now.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess my question is if we're going to invest $250,000 into a street sweeper, shouldn't we invest more time into using it? Instead of like, we're only spending $10,000 between wages and equipment rentals, et cetera, for street sweeping. Shouldn't we invest more money?
And Lucas, wouldn't it get used more? Cause this wouldn't be specific for streets. So it probably would be used more, right, Lucas?
Yeah, it's a much more versatile machine, so we'd be able to utilize it to do a lot more of the cleanup that we tend to do by hand or different things. And it would be utilized more often. One of the things that we run into with the current model that we have is it's an open cab. And in the spring, it tends to be pretty chilly, between 5 and 7 a.m. So that does kind of impede on when we can do things. When it's 25 degrees out, it's hard to have an operator sitting on an open air machine. So it definitely would get utilized significantly more.
Suggestion, why don't we leave it in the budget, leave it in the CIP, encourage Lucas to try and come in below, I think it's 275, but I'm not sure. I have too many numbers. And encourage him to try and not make it quite as expensive, look into a possibility of a used one that would still have a lot of life left, and it's not my area of expertise. So if he's saying we've got to have it to make it work.
We'll bring back like with all our projects over $40,000.
Yeah.
And bring back multiple options and council can accept or reject.
Yeah.
That's typically how we
You
do
guys can give us a couple of them that would work. I'm okay with that.
But yeah, well noted. We're gonna have a machine and use it.
Yeah.
So we don't waste $250,000 or whatever the amount is. All right, so the next meeting, December 18th, is a regular council. If there's no other questions here, we have the budget, the CIP to adopt next December 18th, and we also have the police union agreement as well as the IBW, DPW union agreement. And then we may or may not have a substation. I've reached out to Gentleman with the property there, Bester Road and Bester Lloyd there, and they were reviewing the cost breakdown of the different, options, and they said they wanted to meet this week. I just haven't heard if they can meet this week, so. But ideally, I would like to have this I've talked to the mayor about this wrapped up, January next year at our council meeting, one way or another, so we have a final location, so we can just move forward. So, hopefully I can hear back from him this week, and it's on the agenda for next Monday. If not, we'll wait till January. Oh, and board and commissions, we're appointing the next Monday as well. And I believe last time council wanted to see for existing members who want to be reappointed, attendance, participation.
And just how long they've been on.
How long they've been on.
If you can,
Yeah.
the ones you can.
Oh, yeah, so that, I have a survey out for term limits. That's,
No, not term limits, the length of.
oh, that's what you want to see, all right, yeah, the length of each, yeah, got that, and who appoints who. Term limits in January. I gotta find out.
It's another discussion. Okay, any new or old business? Thank you all for coming, meeting adjourned.